Hello, welcome everybody. I'm Dina. Hope you're doing well. (709-740-4076). We got a bunch of experts. We're going to play videos talking about Israel, Iran, United States, Persia. And so, now, you notice the title of my video. We're a Canadian number, by the way. You can text me, I can call you back if you'd rather do that. Or you can text me, you can call me. So there was 4 reactors in Japan. Each of the reactors had decades of reactor cores at the top of the buildings. They're gone also. Reactor 1, for instance, explosion. Okay, so I'll show you the 4 buildings. We'll play the videos on Israel, Iran in about 2 minutes or less. So the A-10 Warthog, we know that's going to be down there. You know, when you're talking about aircraft carriers, remember they have a battalion of warships with them. It's not just an aircraft carrier. So when you pull all those aircraft carriers back, they pull back battalions of troops that were on warships. I would imagine because Iran was using a cluster missiles, where the missile breaks open after traveling all that way, and then releases around 70, 80 missiles. They're each very powerful, and their anti-missile systems are not designed for something like that. And so there's no way they're going to stop it. You put 5 of them on top of an aircraft carrier. You can do the numbers. It's a lot of missiles. They can't knock all of them out of the sky, right? Or even close to it. The A-10 Warthog. So recently, last couple of years, there was this story showed up. United States gathered to dispose of depleted uranium shells. Now, these are fully loaded depleted uranium munitions, dolrams. In the United States study questioned disposal of 35.7 million dirty bombs. Ammunitions with a core of depleted uranium, also known as dirty bombs. If you take it, wrap it up in conventional explosives, it's a dirty beep. Used for the needs of the military aviation. What needs? They don't have a adversary that they can't penetrate with conventional weapons, right? There's no need to use it. And so, even if you don't use it, they need fresh, brand new ones. And 35.7 million, the A-10 Warthog is only dirty bombs, shoots around 1.5 tons a minute. These are absurd numbers we're talking about. How do you dispose of 30? So, the military, by proxies, and it's not just the A-10 Warthog that are using these munitions. Israel is using a lot of those munitions. In fact, Ukraine had to give up their supply chain from the U.S. for Israel, for their tanks, because they have 4,000 tanks that are using the 155 millimeter dolrams, depleted uranium low-level radioactive bombs. We're going to jump right into the Israeli videos. We've been doing this show now for a long time. I've been at this 25 years. Are countries with nuclear power plants surrounded by farms poisoning millions of people a year at stores? So every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms, is incredibly contaminated because the fuel pools have no containment. And there's decades of reactor cores, because we're 30, 40-year-old reactors. You're putting 5.5 reactor cores at the top of the buildings in the fuel pools every decade. And so they're still splitting atoms for millions of homes and businesses for each reactor core. And you're talking about 8, 10, 12, 14 reactor cores at the top of each of the buildings. So instead of power for 8 or 10 million homes, they're splitting the atoms, the same atoms with no containment, and they're going up to tall, skinny stacks, and every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. So I know that might be confusing for some people, but I hope that helped you appreciate the madness. Fuel rods at Fukushima number 2 were fully exposed. So reactor 1 detonated. Reactor 2 detonated, but it stayed kind of intact. But the reactor core went China syndrome. It went down into the earth. And then the ground, of course, when it hits water, the water expands so rapidly, it splits the earth open. And this is a video 40 times normal speed of the plume coming out of the ground. Now, in 6 places, it was at 10 sieverts per hour coming out of the ground at Fukushima. 3 sieverts will melt your organs, the homeless and the destitute, because scientists ain't going there. They had to abandon the site constantly for years because these plumes are lethal doses. If you're in that plume, you died. Not maybe, not perhaps, not almost. And 10 sieverts an hour is coming out of the ground. That's bioaccumulation. It's thousands of sieverts. You had 4 reactors, all in a row, all lose their inventories. And at the top of each of the buildings that don't exist anymore were the inventories. So reactor 2, that looks pretty good. That's one I'd like to show you, right? But on one side of reactor 2 was reactor 3. On the other side was reactor 4. You ain't getting the number 2. And so they had decades of reactor cores at the top of each of the buildings. And in reactor 3 in particular, the entire cores and the fuel pools were ejected right into the buildings. And you watch the videos, you'll find them. Easy enough if you look for them. So this is the official story. Now, this depiction would be 150 feet above the stump to your left. So Israel and Iran is not going to get to that stage. Well, we hope not anyway. There was reactor 3 and 4. At the top of each of the buildings is 7, 8, 9 reactors. So we rough it out to 8, counting the reactor cores 9. So 36 reactor cores are missing from the tops of 4 of these buildings. Those tops don't exist anymore. And the one that kind of looks like it does is gone deep underground where it met water, expanded, and spread out. But the emissions, 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. Now, just to take it a little more crazy, because everybody's paying attention to this war compared to Fukushima, this is just a stump of reactor 3. So reactor 4 was the same thing. You'll never see that picture of the 4 sides of reactor 4. And that's your depiction. The fuel pools are at the top of the building, reactor cores at the top of the building. But officially, this is the official picture. And we know this is the actual official picture because all kinds of media have claimed they were at the top of the building that doesn't exist. I don't see how that could happen at Iran and at Israel. If you think I got a good point, give me a thumbs up. Think some full of shit, give me a thumbs up. I provide you with the evidence, though. So, on top of that, the fallout from this has been astronomical. And now we're seeing all species of whales showed up starved to death, what is described as late-stage emaciation. We're seeing this symmetrical with all the species. If you go to my live streams and scroll down through a few live rows of my videos, you'll see video after video after video of documentation of species after species after species have died of starvation because the radioactive fallout. So I don't think... Now, Iran and Israel, either one of them are combined, can produce that kind of radioactive fallout from just a small amount of the inventories. All right, here we go. So Colonel Douglas McGregor, he formerly had a tank division in the Gulf War. He's retired. He's about 70... I apologize if I get any of my information wrong, 72, 73 or something. He's going to give you some good insight into the thinkings of Israel. We got a few clips of him. We got a few clips of Scott Ritter, former weapons expert they sent into Iraq and who said there was no weapons of mass destruction. That didn't stop the war, as everybody knows. This is the videos I clipped out for you of these experts are going to give you insights you're not going to find browsing through stories or YouTube crap. Like the mainstream media is not going to give you this extra insight. So I put a bunch of those different clips together. And remember, Israel used to brag about killing Palestinian kids. And so don't think they won't be doing the same thing in Iran and Lebanon and everywhere else they're going. Because when you're out there bragging about it on Facebook and Twitter, it's normal, and you're getting 10,000 shares and 3,000 retweets. You're a rock star in Israel, and there's a few problems that need to be addressed because these are war crimes when you're doing stuff like that. The rest of the world understands that. Let's play these clips. I'm working on...
Trump is summoning the aerospace industry heads
move the volume
to meet with him in the White House, presumably to tell them our missiles and munitions have done a great job, right?
Right. High five. We're done.
Yeah.
You guys have done such an amazing job. No, not that we've spent over, $1 trillion and we're out of Tomahawk missiles and we don't have Patriot systems. Like, that's really what that meeting's about, right?
Well, I would think so, about a number of things, but it's not an indicator of imminent success or that we're on the threshold of victory. This other business, the Israelis just announced the mobilization of 100,000 reservists. I'm hearing that a lot of those reservists are not going to show up, and they've got to man the force that they're trying to ship into Lebanon, where they're meeting, again, resistance despite enormous bombing. I just don't see the evidence for success. And moreover, now I'm hearing from people who are saying, oh, you don't understand, Doug. The Iranians are running out of ballistic missiles. They're running out of cruise missiles. Why do you say that? Well, they haven't fired as many over the last 2 days as they did at the beginning. I said, well, obviously, they have to have targets. What have they got left to shoot at? They've already destroyed all of our bases. They've done enormous damage to the infrastructure, command and control, radars, Patriot batteries, THAAD batteries, you name it. No, you don't understand. They're running out. As soon as somebody tells me the enemy's running out and that's the reason, I tend to remember Ukraine. Oh, the Russians are running out of ammunition. They're running out of missiles. Oh, the Russians are losing. The Iranians are winning. I don't believe anything, frankly. I want to look at a different indicator. And the indicator right now, it comes in the form of insurance premiums for shipping. They have risen by 640%.
To go
Just
through
think about
the
that.
Strait of Hormuz.
We don't have to shut down the Straits of Hormuz right now. In other words, it doesn't have to be blocked if you're an Iranian. All you have to do is make sure that the risk that insurers have to take is too high. And that's what's happened. We have 3,200 ships sitting to go in and out of the Straits of Hormuz. Now, if you're a Russian-flagged or Chinese-flagged tanker, you're allowed to leave. You're allowed to come in. But if you're anybody else, you're going to be stopped. And right now, nobody wants to insure the ships. So these effects are profound. Higher oil and refined product risk premium, higher freight and war risk insurance, tighter financial conditions. And if ships and premiums stay high, Iran is achieving a strategic effect without having to win tactically. So what do you need to keep this going? More drones? Sure, some more drones, occasional missiles. And who is going to invade you? Oh, I forgot, the Kurds, right? Only now we've discovered there is no Kurdish army preparing to invade. We're trying to stand one up, but the Kurds aren't that stupid. They've been down this road before with us, and we betrayed them. So, I just don't know what the outlook is, except to say I agree. This could go on for many, many more weeks.
There's 3,200 ships backed up already. They want to go up the strait or down the Strait of Hormuz, but they can't. China and Russia's ships can just go straight through. They're not going to meet any resistance from Iran. Iran there's 53 Muslim countries there. Nobody's standing up alongside of Iran, vocally anyway, and except for China and Russia, which is that's quite interesting. This is Scott Ritter. He's a former weapons inspector. He's the guy who blew the whistle on Iraq and said, Afghanistan said there was no weapons of mass destruction. He's on fire in this video. He's been doing interviews nonstop for about 9 days. He's got the narrative down pretty fat right now. So,
well, it's been the most grotesque mismanagement imaginable. First of all, let's start off with the notion that the United States is a constitutional republic founded on the basis of the rule of law. That is an absolute, both in terms of domestic application and through international law. We have always claimed that this was our core value. We haven't always operated with that, but at least there was the pretense that we were a nation that adhered or sought to adhere to the rule of law. This war is an illegal war of aggression with no foundation in any legal authority, domestic or international. This is the ultimate war crime that's being perpetrated. And the fact that the American people remain ignorant of this is as much on the government as it is on them. We have long ago stopped being effective citizens here in this country. We have long ago stopped holding our government accountable for what they do in our name. We are a nation of compliant sheep, and we have a psychopath that is our shepherd leading us down this path. So this is an illegal war of aggression right off the start. How do you explain an illegal war of aggression? Well, you lie. And this administration has lied across the board. We've lied about why we're fighting this. In fact, is the administration can't articulate a cognizable reason why we're engaged in this conflict. We were told it's about nuclear threat, but we know that Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, who is ultimately responsible for the singular assessment from the U.S. intelligence community that there is no nuclear threat from Iran, that Iran is not pursuing a nuclear weapon. But the president has chosen to embrace an alternative set of facts. And those alternative set of facts come from Israel. And so now we have the real reason. We are going to war for Israel on a timetable designed by Israel to achieve objectives that benefit Israel, but not the United States. And in the process, we have abandoned all those whom we claim to be our regional allies, all of the Gulf Arab states who've been buying billions of dollars of American military equipment under the pretense that the United States would be there for them in their time of crisis, are now looking around abandoned by the United States because we only defend one nation, and that is the nation of Israel, and we're not even doing a good job at that. The president has changed his war plan 5 times in 10 days. That tells you how utterly confused they are. They went to war based upon artificial, unachievable objectives. The notion of regime change by assassinating Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of the Twelver faction of the Shia faith in Iran, that you're going to kill this man and the faithful will collapse, is absurd. The exact opposite took place by murdering Ali Khamenei, and it was an act of murder. What we did is ensure that the Iranian people rally around this government in a way that we will never be able to separate the two. There will never be regime change in Iran. 90 million people will all die before they give in to the United States. That is the fact. And then we were told that there was, that there wouldn't be a big price to pay because this war was going to be over quickly, that we have overwhelming military power that is being brought together in a comprehensive fashion. Pete Hegseth has said, we are the most lethal fighting force on the face of the earth. We kill, and the Iranians don't stand a chance. And yet Pete Hegseth has had to change his war plan 5 times in 10 days because we're not achieving military objectives. In fact, just the opposite. The enemy is defeating us across the board. The United States is not only losing this war, Rick, we have lost this war. We will not achieve any of the objectives we have set out to achieve. At the end of the day, we will run out of the ability to defend ourselves long before the Iranians run out of the ability to attack us.
He's going to go
love when people would say to you, Colonel, a colonel who led men into battle, for crying out loud, and who has sources, deep sources within the United States military, more than any of us sitting here on this table, or anyone who's like probably watching right now, unless there's some sort of keyboard cowboy that we don't know about. But to say to you that you're wrong about what Iran's missile capacity is. You've been studying this for decades, and their ability to sustain this, you've laid out many times on our show. So I guess I'll just ask you straight out, is there a way that we could actually beat Iran, short of a nuclear weapon?
Well, I think the bar is very low for Iran. All Iran has to do to be victorious, if you will, is survive. That's it. That's all they have to do. Continue to lob missiles, continue to launch drones, strike back if we come close to the country in whatever way they can. They've managed to maintain command and control. They've dispersed their forces. Those forces are surviving. They seem to have a very large supply of missiles and drones, contrary to what anybody may think.
I know on day 3, Iran had said that it was 2,000 drones and 600 missiles, but they definitely a big difference in those numbers now. Okay, so Benji, remember this itineration of this Wars 2, right? In 9 months or so ago, there was so-called intervention. Now we're going to let's challenge the war narrative. Because some are saying, like they like to say they're not going to war, they're like an intervention. Listen to what they got to say.
Well, we just had an important series of votes on the House floor. As you know, the War Powers Resolution failed. That is the right result.
So war power.
We are not...
Right, they were trying to make it illegal, some members of parliament.
Not at war. We have no intention of being at war. The President and the Department of Defense have made this very clear. The Department of War has made it very clear.
That they're not at war. Okay.
The President said recently there will be no deal with Iran except unconditional surrender. What?
I'm sorry, the volume a little high. So how can you surrender if you're not at war? Right? How does that work? Notice how cocky this creepy weirdo actually is?
This is a limited operation. It's an operation that's limited in its scope and duration.
Yeah, limited operation. So how can you surrender for a limited operation?
It has a very clear mission, and that mission is nearly accomplished by all estimates.
Accomplished by
They will
all.
surrender.
Typically, the understanding of a surrender is person to person. Is that what would be required in a matter like this?
Watch
Well,
this.
there's a lot of different ways. Whether they want to admit it or not, whether their pride lets them say it out loud or not, it's President Trump who will set the terms of that.
He's very nervous, eh?
This is the stupidity of the diaspora. These fake Iranians are out there dancing, celebrating the death of Ali Khamenei, and ignoring the fact that the United States, on the opening day of the war, fired 4 cruise missiles into a facility that was evacuated by the Revolutionary Guard Command long before the conflict. One of these missiles struck a school. The fourth missile, 3 missiles, 2 missiles struck empty warehouses, 1 struck a school. The 4th missile was loitering over the site, collecting data, sending it back for battle damage assessment. The 2 warehouses were empty, no secondary explosions. But the 3rd site that they struck, they noticed an accumulation of human beings, people running to the site. And so they ordered the 4th missile to strike. The 4th missile went up, came down, and hit. The missile is designed to penetrate with a bunker-busting capability, but there's an additional factor to this missile. Our brilliant weapons designers have concluded that the excess fuel in a Tomahawk missile at the moment of impact can actually be weaponized into a thermobaric weapon, a fuel-air explosive. And so they hit the button, turned the excess fuel into a thermobaric, and the people they saw running were the children who survived the initial attack. They went to the prayer hall with their teachers, and they asked the parents to come in and retrieve their children. Parents are on their way. So the movement you saw were survivors going into the building, teachers with them, parents come to them, and we put the 4th cruise missile in there, turned it into a thermobaric bomb, and burned these children alive. That's this war in a nutshell.
Yeah.
We don't know what we're doing. We don't know what we're targeting. And all we're doing is murdering people. And you know why this happened? Because Pete Hegseth canceled a Department of Defense directive that required a civilian mitigation team to go over each target to make sure that we weren't striking the wrong targets. He called that woke. He called that ineffective. He wanted to be the most lethal fighting force in the world. Kill, kill, kill. Well, Pete, you killed them. 170 of them. Children. You're a murderer. You're a war criminal. And so is Donald Trump. And so is every American who supports this war. Because this war is an illegal war of aggression. We aren't obeying the laws of war. And we're simply slaughtering innocent people to appease a bunch of neoconservatives who have an outdated concept of what the world should look like and who have completely subordinated the interests of the United States to the state of Israel. And I apologize for losing my temper. I'm the father of 2 girls, and I would hunt down and kill anybody who brought harm to my children.
Scott Ritter, obviously.
Now, Ray McGovern, he's a former intelligence agency liaison officer, CX liaison to the 7 presidents, I believe it was, in the United States. And he said killing the girls and the religious leader and the leader of the country was meant to shock the country. Like almost, they were hoping everybody was going to surrender. But clearly, now, there's some credence to that, because when you look at Pete, who he was just yelling at, is this guy here.
They will surrender.
Typically,
they will not surrender. Everybody knows that. Right? Ukraine didn't surrender. Oh, Ukraine's going to surrender. It didn't surrender. Gaza's going to surrender. They never surrendered. The children fought the Israelis by throwing rocks at them. So Israel made it a capital punishment for a lot of children to throw rocks by allowing the soldiers to shoot them down, right? Now, there's some extreme examples of that. There's been going on. This Israelis are raised to aspire to do that, because now you're a true Israeli. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu, his last name isn't Benjamin Netanyahu.
His real name was Milikowski, born of Ashkenazi lineage from Poland. Benjamin Netanyahu has neither the blood, nor the land, nor the language of those he claims to represent.
Right, and he raised his youngest child, who, when he was 15, won a contest by being able to recite off the top of his head, like a robot, like a drone, the Torah and the Talmud, right, at 15. So Benjamin Mikulski, now known as Netanyahu, was able to ask his son to justify religiously doing this to the Muslims or the Palestinians or the Iranians. And then, because Israel is a religious cult, even though Benji himself is not religious at all.
In fact, what happened on October 7th, when over 1,000 people were massacred in one fell swoop, that's equivalent to about 40,000 Americans.
So every Israeli is equal to 40 Americans.
Evoke Jewish history and use religious text and sentiment to rally support for the attacks. Nurode explains how this increases right-wing sentiment in Israel.
When he announced the offensive against Iran, the Israeli prime minister didn't just talk about perceived threats. Benjamin Netanyahu invoked Jewish history, drawing parallels with Jews rising up against Persian enslavement more than 2,000 years ago.
Right.
My brothers and sisters, in 2 days we celebrate the holiday of Purim.
And which just happened at the same time as they attacked Iran. That's some coincidence, isn't it?
2,500 years ago, in ancient Persia, an enemy rose against us with the exact same goal of destroying our...
Yeah, and didn't the Persians fly around on carpets?
People.
A day later, Netanyahu invoked scripture, describing the government in Tehran as Amalek.
Amalek. So that's a death curse, whoever you're pointing the finger at.
Ultimate enemy in the Old Testament. The enemy
It's a death
whose
curse.
memory and existence must be erased.
We read in this week's Torah portions, remember what Amalek did to you. We remember and we act.
It's not the first time
So
this
invoking-
reference is made by Netanyahu to justify...
He's invoking a death curse.
violence against an adversary. In fact, his reference to Palestinians as Amalek was cited during hearings in the genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice.
Right, and I finished, there's not very much, I'll finish playing that 1 second. So remember this here. He was never prosecuted for it. He was quite the opposite.
Inciting religious fervor is not unique to Netanyahu. It's a popular tactic that right-wing and populist leaders often use to rally support, and it often pays off. Opinion polls show how widespread these sentiments are. For example, last year, a poll by Hebrew University on Israel's war on Gaza found that 75% of Jewish Israelis believe there are no innocents in Gaza. A survey released last month by the Institute for National Security suggests 78% of Israelis consider Iran a serious threat. Mixing scripture with mainstream politics is playing with fire, and it's led to talk of greater Israel spanning from the Euphrates to the Nile River and erasing existing Arab countries in the process, an ambition referenced not only by Netanyahu, but also by the head of the opposition in Israel.
And we defended ourselves in the Seventh Front War. But understand that in the Holocaust, October 7th, Pearl Harbor, 9/11, happened every day for 5 years. 5,000, you know, just like 5,000. October 7th, 5,000.
5,000 October 7th. Well, here's what they done to their neighbors. This is how good of a neighbor they
710. This is the number of days of absolute horror that the people in Gaza have endured. 65,000 is the number of Palestinians ascertained killed, including of which 75% are women and children.
But
in fact, we shall start thinking of 680,000 because this is the number that some scholars and scientists claim being the real death toll in Gaza, and it would be hard to be able to prove or disprove this number, especially if investigators and others remained banned from entering the occupied Palestinian territory and particularly the Gaza Strip. But if this number is confirmed, 380,000 of these are infants under 5.
380,000 are infants under the age of 5 years old.
So Israel obviously received a blow that is 40 times bigger than that, okay?
So let's slaughter everybody with almanac and just shoot them down. No one is going to arrest them. So don't worry about it. Kill as many as you want after almanac.
Exhausted, that are tired. At least a million Israelis have left the country and gone elsewhere. And I'm sure more would leave if they were able to do so. So I think the future for Israel is ominous. It strikes me that Israel and Iran may well end up in this contest that I would describe as competitive collapse. In other words, which state falls apart first? And if I were betting, I would say Iran will not be the first, that it will be Israel. Internally, they're already bringing in large numbers of mercenaries to fight, and that's been going on almost from the beginning. Israel has sustained a lot of damage. It's probably going to sustain a lot more before this is over. And I don't know where Mr. Netanyahu is most of the time. Everybody keeps asking that question. He's not exactly very visible these days. So I think Israel is in trouble. Let's put it that way. Now, when we go to the Persian Gulf, we look at the Emirates, we look at Saudi Arabia, but particularly the Emirates, I think we as a nation are finished there because deterrence has failed. What the Iranians have demonstrated pretty conclusively is to fight wars, you don't really need navies and air forces if you're defending your country. With missiles and unmanned systems and ground troops.
Well, it's not a war. They're on a mission. They almost finished it. They said everything is working out the way they wanted it to. When you're occupying, they come out and said they want to occupy the country. They want control of the oil so the terrorists can't use it as a weapon. Which is, they're going to take Cuba next, apparently. Let's finish this out.
You can wage war for a very, very long time. We are at the end of a 6,000-mile logistical pipeline. We've got to replenish everything. We don't know how many missiles we've fired. We're not sure about how many enemy missiles we've intercepted. And when you're in that kind of position, when in doubt, you tend to make things...
Just roll that back a little bit. Because I got to shut up. So, they've got a long pipeline to feed them, right?
Is to fight wars, you don't really need navies and air forces if you're defending your country. With missiles and unmanned systems and ground troops, you can wage war for a very, very long time. We are at the end of a 6,000-mile logistical pipeline. We've got to replenish everything. We don't know how many missiles we've fired. We're not sure about how many enemy missiles we've intercepted. And when you're in that kind of position, when in doubt, you tend to make things up. I think we're making a lot up, saying that we're doing a lot better than we are. But it's impossible to know with any precision. But the point is, you can bomb lots of people in Iran over a long period of time. But you're not going to bring down that nation. And you're not going to bomb its current government out of existence. So when you look at the map, I tend to rely more heavily on Rebar. I find that most of their data is pretty good. And as I look at the charts right now, I'd say the Iranians are continuing to do quite well. And I don't think that we are pounding them into the dust or pulverizing them out of existence. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're going to send more troops and more firepower there. We've got 3 carrier battle groups that we can surge. And over the next 2 weeks, I think they're going to get them ready and bring them over so they can replace the 2 carrier battle groups that are there now. So,
this is really interesting. The carrier groups ran away. And so one of the things the military doesn't want to acknowledge, there's a couple of statements to make here. One, if the carrier groups stay in a certain range, they can get pictures. And then they can find out how much damage and what was damaged, right? And then that could be used against them. Now each of these aircraft carriers will travel with a whole bunch of warships. With incredible, their job is to protect the carrier, right? So there's submarines down there. There's all kinds of stuff going on. And this is not, there's usually 14 to 30, depending on, so in this case, you can imagine there's quite a entourage with them. Now, Israel, anybody seen the videos of Israel soldiers removing I got that over here. Removing cameras on telephone poles. It looks like they got hacked or they were being targeted, and that Iran's weapons were good enough to get the target. There's some coordination going on. They're disabling that. They're not allowing anybody to post videos. Now, there's a military censorship, a government censorship, there's personal censorship, because everybody, is in the military, they're going to easily cooperate. But it does raise questions about the security of every country that has CCTV. If another country is going to war against you, they can weaponize the CCTV rather to get administration out of the picture like they've done. Now, Scott Ritter is going to talk about the targeting going on too. Some really interesting stuff to take into consideration because Israel has targeted, as you know, the administration in Tehran. Iran now has reciprocated, and apparently they're very good at it. Benjamin Netanyahu's house and bunker have been destroyed. His brother's house was destroyed. He was significantly injured. There's some controversies at the end of this, but not much.
Work, it will never work,
I'll check
and
the
Russia
volume.
will always defeat it because nations that have sound ballistic missile technology will always overcome ballistic missile defense technology.
Right, so any country, Patriot missile systems or whatever, where they're meant to shoot down incoming missiles at a certain speed, and they have radar systems for hundreds of miles. They've all been taken out. So the eye's been taken out. There's $5 billion or so installations taken out, radar installations in the Middle East. The only one left there is in Turkey. Has been decommissioned and given back to Turkey, which is above Iran in context of the coastline, right? And they have the Caspian Sea's one direction, and then they have the Black Sea, I believe. They're a significant size, right? Well, Scott's going to tell us, if I can shut up. I'll shut up and get out of the picture. Otherwise, it's hard to listen. It's only a short video. It's really important.
This is a statement of truth that's being played out in real time over the skies of Israel as we speak. Now, in terms of cueing, targeting is that you can have a missile that's very accurate unless you put it at the right target, you don't know what you're doing. So getting cueing information is very important. The Iranians had a very effective intelligence relationship with Hezbollah, and Hezbollah was able to provide some very solid cueing information to the Iranians. Hezbollah's capabilities have been degraded somewhat, but they're still actively involved. But getting real-time cueing intelligence data from nations possessing overhead collection capability, satellites, is essential for,
Wow, look at that. We're looking at a missile right now, and you can almost see the interceptors just, they go by it. In fact, the interceptors sometimes blow up themselves instead of the missile when we look at these videos. There it is, goes right by
some
it.
of the interceptors are designed to explode in front of a missile, but they're playing catch up. They're never able to catch up with the interceptor. The other thing is the interceptors are programmed. You talked about moving in like an S-shaped system. That's because the interceptor launches and then has to make an adjustment to get in.
Okay, so let me just back that up because that's kind of important. So the Iranian missiles are coming in. This is a good example where the missile it's traveling hundreds of kilometers to get here. So when it gets within 6 or 7, don't quote me, say 6 or 7 miles of their GPS, because they're GPS driven, they're getting Chinese and Russian technology minimum and their own. And then you're looking at all of these other missiles will shoot out. And so instead of sending, you can't intercept all of these. Their defense systems have never seen it before. So imagine this coming down on aircraft. Now this will cover 5 to 8 square kilometer area. And if you look at the aircraft carrier groups, they're usually in that kind of configuration, right? And so you're talking about 80, around 80 is the consensus of these missiles. They're apparently very powerful. These are very big rockets we're talking about, traveling hundreds of kilometers. Their payload is divided up individual rockets. And so if you lob 10, that's 800 coming down at an aircraft carrier. You are going to do some significant damage to the aircraft carrier, no matter how hard. If they got a load of jets and weapons on the deck, and they usually do, you're going to bang a lot of that. Right? And so they got to go away just to do repairs because they did get hit. They refuse to acknowledge it because that's the last thing you want to do in a combat situation, is to acknowledge the damage, right? To validate the acquisitions, the targeting, and everything else. Which is all stupid anyway, right? It's idiotic. It's meant to just... Now, there's... anybody paying attention to this knows that the U.S. government has been invoking Armageddon to the conscripts, to the victims that wear the uniform that didn't sign up for this kind of stuff. Iran wasn't attacking their country. They didn't know there was a war. Nobody knew there was a war. So imagine this coming down on an aircraft carrier, a group even. But remember, this is going to disperse flight, and there could be 800 with just 10 of these missiles.
Our program, you talked about moving in like an S-shaped system. That's because the interceptor launches, then has to make an adjustment to get an intercept angle. But by the time it completes that intercept angle, the Iranian missiles are accelerating on their own. These are missiles that don't maintain the same speed. They can accelerate because they have rocket, and they maneuver. So the missile's doing an S-shaped turn, seeking to hit a point where there's an intercept solution, and the Iranian missile's not anywhere near there because it has accelerated past or maneuvered, to a different area. This is why they're missing. Our technologies cannot keep up with the advancements that the Iranians made. But we get back to targeting. The Iranians are showing an ability to get intelligence information inputs in the morning and strike in the afternoon with deadly effect. And also, they're starting to expand their target deck. Remember, they didn't invent the concept of regime change. That was Israel on day one, killing Ali Khamenei. Last night, the Iranians struck the home of Benjamin Netanyahu. They killed his brother. They struck the home of Ben Gvir. He is seriously wounded, may not survive. Iran is going to start to take out the totality of Israel's leadership. This is the reality of this conflict. Israel played the regime change game. It's going to be the Israelis that are going to be paying the highest price. The Iranians are no longer wearing kid gloves. They've taken them off, and they're coming in bare knuckle.
And so he's going to say, and I cut it off accidentally, he's going to say that the media is reporting that his brother, Benjamin Mygoski, or whatever his name is, was in a traffic accident. And he said, yeah. And Scott says, yeah, he must have ran into his house and started a big fire and destroyed it. Because Scott has no reason to fabricate or misrepresent. All right, so this is the last clip.
This is going to go on, as you pointed out. Everybody stopped talking about 48 hours. Remember, we go back to Witkoff, and he said, well, President Trump and I thought they were going to capitulate. I mean, after all, look at all the firepower we amassed. Persia has been with us for 2,700 years. I don't see any evidence that they're about to go away. I think they'll endure. I think ultimately, by enduring, they will win. The question is, what sobers us up? I think it's going to be economics. Remember, Japan depends for 73% of its oil on the Persian Gulf. South Korea depends about 65% of its oil comes out of the Persian Gulf. China, 50%. But the Chinese have substantial strategic reserves, and they have a new pipeline into Siberia. So that no doubt helps a great deal. India's oil, 50% of it comes from the Persian Gulf. And right now, Indian industries, whether it's ceramics or automobile tires or any number of things, anything that contains petroleum, all of your your fertilizers contain elements from petroleum. Those businesses are being destroyed in India. And people are beginning to say, no, wait a minute. Did President Trump ever consult with any of the nations with which we are aligned or nations that are ultimately friendly to us before he decided to do this? The answer is no. Did anybody really present him with a systematic analysis of how likely it was that we would be successful striking Iran from the air, or was that simply waved aside based on anecdotal evidence provided by the Israelis that said, oh, this will be over in 2 days or 3 days or 4 days?
They were saying that. Right?
We don't know the whole story. I mean,
Trump comes out and Department of War, because they changed their name last year, was it, or this year, to the Department of War from the Department of Defense. He won't accept nothing but a complete surrender, which, of course, right, that's never going to happen. That was clear last time. So we don't know how this is going to play out. It ain't going to be good for anybody. So all of this is very, very, very unsettling because of the way it played out. Again, they were going for talks, meeting, everything was going the way it is. It was always difficult. They needed lots of 5-star hotel rooms and caviar and everything else to get the kinks out. And let me get rid of this. Now we see the price of oil climbing. It's up 115, 120 a barrel. They're expecting that to roll easily past 150 early next week. These are unprecedented numbers, right? You had Ukraine, you had COVID, then which flipped the switch on the entire planet, right? The whole planet done the impossible, shut down. And they bullied the whole planet in less than 3 days, UN did. Right? They locked people in their homes. There was all these horror stories and videos coming out of China. There's an absurd amount of controversies now about that whole betrayal to humanity. And then we had Ukraine and Russia. Now, the Ukraine is a proxy war for NATO. NATO was created in response to the Soviet Union being superior to the United States, right, and Great Britain and France and that. And so NATO became this alliance of this gang, right, of countries with a lot of military. So what we're seeing now is kind of bizarre because we're not seeing any Muslim countries become vocal, right? And it's really interesting. It's bizarre, but we are seeing China. So is Iran the proxy? Is Iran the next Ukraine? Right? It's the proxy. Are we going to see Ukraine? Now with Ukraine, I have probably the worst collection ever of people being chased by small drones. The majority of them being made by Google's ex-CEO, Eric Schmidt, who we always knew that guy was going to be just kooky, unhinged evil. And now he's making drones that chases children that have been conscripted off the streets around until they can't run no more and then blows them up. And some of them even be begged to blow up because they're missing a leg from the last one that showed up. These are absurd crimes against humanity that we're talking about. There's no way to justify that. Now, Zelensky is on his way down the Middle East, and he's willing to trade. He wants some Patriot missiles for his barbecues or something. And so he's willing to trade some of his expert drone serial killers to help out Israel, not Iran, right? So all of a sudden, this is NATO's proxy, Ukraine, is going down in the Middle East to get into the war, which officially they have no other way of getting into, right? They're not being attacked. Which is a NATO is a allegiance of it's 30 plus countries. If you look up NATO and you go to the search engine, the first thing you're going to see in a big grayed out patch is NATO. It'll have like 30 militaries, not 30 countries. It'll say 30 or 31 or 32, whatever it is now, militaries. Right, they were created in response to the Soviet Union, the cowards, who broke up the country and took away everybody's pensions by proxy, left them abandoned. Just the most cowardly thing you could ever do, really. So is that the approach? I'm sure it's much more sinister, but is that the approach that they're using to get into the war with the Muslim country, with Iran and that, and by proxy, because you got NATO is Zelensky, right, and Russia and China, which have a free travel. They have a hallway slip for the Strait of Hormuz, so to speak, where they can their ships are going to be with singles on it. They won't be interfered with, right? But there's 3,200 ships piled up there right now. There's a lot of countries. You got India, Pakistan, Turkey. You got all kinds of countries that are dependent upon Iran for oil, for all their industries. There's all kinds of them going under in less than 9 days. This is total pandemonium all of a sudden. 3,200 container ships is pandemonium. If everything goes good tomorrow and everybody can do their own thing, it's going to take forever to get those through the gates safely, right? You got an absurd amount of money tied up in 3,200 container ships, absurd amount of money and resources. Like so Saudi Arabia, Qatar, places like this, they're dependent upon imports. And so they're not going to have any toilet paper in a few days. Let's put it that way. A lot of people. So nationwide increases, and I'm not going to try to pronounce that name, it's where children are born with a single testicle post-Fukushima. So there was a significant increase post-Fukushima of children being born. That was just one of the many studies. There's so many studies on Japan's nuclear meltdowns. We started the show, we were talking about the radioactive fallout, and could Iran and Israel, the United States nuclear war, so to speak, against a country with no nuclear weapons. Israel is going to use a nuclear weapon if they can't stop Iran. Because Iran is going down into their bunkers. They already took it up, allegedly. We got no footage coming out from Israel. Everything is shut. The pipe is shut. Its throttle is choked off. And they've been interfering with a lot of search engines. And BitChute has been interfered with heavily. I'm sure that's part of their normal war plans is to hack these and make it difficult for information that scrub the net and then release, limit it. They're controlling the search, whatever's going to show up in the search engine. People are posting, but it's not showing up most likely. Because, there's 7 million people in Israel, for instance. There's people posting who don't know any better or stupid. But there's now the social networking sites are censoring too. With, embedded corporate personhood is embedded with the social media that control that. So there must be a lot of damage. Otherwise, why would you do it? They're taking down the street cams, right? So the security cams on the streets to catch the terrorists. People couldn't take it anymore and fought back. Well, more like it, or at least some people will argue. So then, could they create an event with the same attributes? No, because they don't have that kind of inventory. They do have enormous inventories, And it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good for our planet. Now we're seeing all the species of whales are showing up worldwide. When you know what to look for, you start seeing this particular attribute where all the species have starved to death. I mean, this is madness. This is absolute madness what we're talking about. We had broke the food chain after Fukushima's nuclear event. Fukushima was a nuclear event. So this war / intervention, it looks a hell of a lot like a war to me. You brought down battalions, multiple aircraft carriers with battalion war pigs, right, on the ocean realm. These are deadly machines we're talking about. So you're talking about A-10, is the A-10 Warthog down there shooting up the sandcastles? There's only supposed to be used on... just bear with me 1 second. So we're just 2 days away from the 15th anniversary of a catastrophic, apocalyptic event known as Fukushima. Is so important. Despite, now I don't, imagine like there has to be some connection going on for March 11th. Is there going to be some spectacular event on March 11th in Iran or Israel? Bear with me. There we go. I just want to give you, because at the beginning of the show I kind of ran through the nuclear site for you. So when you're seeing all species of whales with their rib cages sticking out, their spinal column sticking up in the air, just the bones of their heads only, these are something we never seen pre-Fukushima's extinction event. Fukushima is an extinction event. And it's not just whales, of course. If you come over to my live streams, there's my videos over here. We're on live right now. So if I refresh the page, you'll see that video there is live. But if you scroll down to the next row, you got insects, plummeting insect numbers signaling imminent collapse of nature. And then you get some more information about Fukushima in that particular video. But then you got 8 long, very long videos. Not all of them. 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, 45 minutes, 2 hours. Now, on top of that, if you go into my playlist, there's another 50 or 60 videos in the mass species die-off birds, insects caused by Fukushima. And I quantify that with the documentation in each and every one of these videos. This is an enormous amount of work. They're minimum typically of a couple hours. But there's an enormous amount of thought and energy there to help you, to educate you, to get you to come to terms with what has happened, and then by proxy start contributing to a better future. Excuse me. And then if you want to go down the rabbit hole, I would suggest following the 15 days of Fukushima that represents the 15th year anniversary that we started last night. This is day 2. And I got some really cool stuff put together. It's going to be information. I'm going to give you so much information in a 15-day period that you become a master of this story and as an incredible benefit to this planet. So when you look in, let me go back to the whales. If you come into my playlist, you can get, I got a lot of anti-nuclear music. Well, in fact, we forgot to play a song tonight, did we? I'm a shithead. I'm going to play a song here in a minute. Fukushima, millions of bags of radioactive soil. You got playlist of all these facets, my marine research expeditions. We carried out for 6 years, 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean without coming home. That was madness. It's an extinction event. These pictures, 736 new Fukushima pictures. That we need that playlist. There's a couple of playlists. The original pictures is 1,900 pictures, and there's links below which you can download the pictures yourself. But I walk you through, that whole playlist will walk you through all the pictures. This playlist is about pictures, and I've done this many times over the years, and I've taken down my last site with 24,000 subscribers when I was on a research expedition looking for spiders, because that's crazy. We took Harvard, MIT, Stanford, and many other major institutions, shakers and movers, and we challenged their narrative with the documentation of their original presentations. And I mean that, and there's links to the original videos. We've also been doing the original, and we're going to be doing some of that over the next 15 days, the original press conferences from Japan. So that Stanford, MIT, Harvard were the press conferences. They released post-Fukushima. But if you scroll down below all the whales, you'll start seeing these kinds of stuff. The situation at the Fukushima, I do audit. So if you do audits, you'll find a lot of these videos. And we'll be doing some of them, of the hideous lies they originally told. Documented. And I've aggregated all of that many years ago, and we finally got around to challenging that. And my, oh my, oh my, it really is just gut-wrenching to see how corrupt this entire industry, this foul and hideous, monstrous industry really is. But all the whales, look at these emaciated. That blue whale should weigh almost 400,000 pounds. It probably weighs 30,000 because it's 100 feet long. But it's starved to death because the ocean can keep it buoyant, I guess. Same as, this is a bronze whale, and that's a bronze whale. They get up to around 90,000 pounds. That's probably 1,800. And that one up there is so emaciated, it's maybe 14,000 pounds, which is 1/8 of what they probably should be, right? You got no right to ignore this stuff. This is not going to go away. This is just going to get worse. And we got every species showing up in late-stage starvation. We know with the gray whale, that gray whale there maybe weighs 5,000 pounds. There's 14,000 of them have died that way since Fukushima broke the food chain. Of just the gray whales. The humpback whales, in 2016, they acknowledged there was 7,000 more on top of an unusual mortality event that have died. We're going to cover a lot of the original research expeditions of footage and videos and pictures in the next 15 days. I got a bum limb down there, so slow and easy wins today. I'm committed to 15 days of this, and hopefully that gets me back up to speed and back into the game, because I've had a few oopsies lately, and it's cost me big time, and unfortunately maybe our planet. So this whale, blue whale up there, is a different one. That maybe weighs 20 tons. It should weigh let's say, because he's probably 90 feet, not 100 feet. So say he should weigh 300,000 pounds. He maybe weighs 30,000 pounds because of skin and bones only. There's nothing left to him. It's just, and we've seen sperm whales we can't even identify. And when you see this peanut head, and you see the spinal column, the shoulder blades, the rib cages, none of these are attributes that should be in a whale. We've never seen that pre-Fukushima. And just look at this blue whale up there. He should weigh 350,000 pounds. He's a full size. He maybe weighs 25,000, but that's what the bones and the skin would weigh in the organs. It's unbelievable that we had no concept pre-Fukushima that whales, just a single species, let alone every species, could end up in this position. We broke the food chain. It's hard to accept. My research expeditions doesn't leave any up for debate. Let me just give you a quick few moments. Now, this week we'll show you a lot more of that kind of stuff. Now, remember, in the first year after Fukushima, it was 865,000 cancers. And like Israel won't release any footage, they stopped releasing those numbers after the first year. So not everybody, there's almost 1 million extra cancers in the first year. I mean, they got a street there in Fukushima City where 7 people dropped dead in the first year. But not everybody got health care. Not everybody was diagnosed. It's not just cancer. There's all kinds of heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. So we built an operation to go out and do the research. And we do the research getting into the tidal zones and do species counts. It's very complicated. So we've done it for 6 years, 4 to 5 months a year, and the species didn't recover. So the pictures to the left are what it should look like in early 2011. And then we have an enormous amount of documentation of the radioactive fallout. This is spiked 1 million times to 10 million times normal, right? We covered that study quite a lot. So the species to your left, now I would never normally get my Zodiac on the beach because of the species to the left. And at one point in my career, I used to pick 20,000 of them a day on the ocean floor. To send to the crazies, Japan. And so they were trying to blame cancer jump from one species to another species. While I was out there doing the research expeditions, I was the only person that was out there, boots on the ground, doing 27,000 islands for 6 years, almost 6 years. And the species to your left are exterminated. That's the end of it. Now, we went back year after year to see if they recovered. So they didn't. And that's why the food chain is broken. And that's why you're seeing all the whales now of every species showing up in severe emaciation. And that's why you're seeing the birds disappear, because it used to be able to supplement their diets in the low tide zones, see? Birds would come into the low tide zones on the 5,000-mile migratory run. There'd be 30,000 insects at the high tide line, and there'd be incredible diversity of species. This incredible, absurdly beautiful magic, absolute magic. The nuclear industry came along and killed it all. And they've done it in increments with just radioactive fallout. So the species to your left now are exterminated. That's not up for debate. They tried to blame it on cancer, but it's absurd. It's just that cancer was jumping from one species to another other species. There's a 19-foot tide exchange. I used to dive 6 hours a day in all of these places. I'm very familiar with them. And that's why you see them pretending they're on top of Reactor 4. Because if the truth comes out... So Israel and Iran is a really interesting point in everybody's lives. We have also destroyed the health of the soil. And we kill the bacteria, the fungus, and by proxy then the million species in the biota, which is going to break down the foliage, the litter, the dead creatures, the excrements, the waste, and turn that into a nutrient and redistribute it back into the ecosystem, recycle the carbon, the nutrients back into the ecosystem to repopulate with the million species. So the million species are just regenerative, perfect environment. You need water to make that work, by the way. So the plants, the trees, the foliage, the meadows, the roots of all the species throughout your ecosystem are dependent upon fungus and bacteria, and that is a host site for 1 million microscopic animals, and they all work in harmony synergistically to enhance each other synergistically to recycle the carbon, the creatures, the waste of the ecosystem back into more life, more babies, more small fledglings, more little Tweety birds, more bumblebees, more, right? And the radioactive fallout was so great that we sterilized it because of the gamma shines, the neutron bombardment, the alpha shines, the beta rays are hammering into each other and then changing direction because they can't mingle. And the radioactive fallout was so intense and so enormous, there was so much of it, that now we have sterilized, we're 15 years down the road, and the horror, the absolute horror of the reality of what has taken place is not up for debate anymore. Our worst fears have come true. And we worked very hard to try to inform this planet. There's a bigger picture you have to put into the equation. The equation is not complete without this picture. This has to go into computation. This has to go into the policies. And so they did. And this is why we're seeing the start. Now, I've been saying for the last year, a couple of years, that most likely there's going to be an event to wipe out a large percentage of the population because the planet can no longer sustain them, right? The glaciers are almost gone, but the biota is gone, right? So now the Earth is not sucking up water anymore because there's no bacteria, no fungus, no biota. That's gone. That was destroyed by the radiation. The creatures weren't able to reproduce because the X-rays, the gammas, the neutrons, the betas, the alphas, because the radioactive fallout is enormous. And we cover that information constantly. This from the academic studies, and we'll jump back into that kind of stuff. So they tell you very little is known about radiation. That's their favorite pun, right? There's very little known about radiation. Well, the reality of it is that's simply not true. They know everything about it, and every study they do is meant to downplay it. But they have to study everything because it is contaminated. Everything. The reason you've seen all these studies is because they contaminated everything, and they had to study everything, quantify it, and downplay it, misrepresent it, in order to quantify that nuclear has some redeeming qualities. So why would you put potassium in with cesium? Because they act the same, but the industry likes to use it to misrepresent, because they're totally different. One is lethal to everything with replicating cells. The other one is part of life. You can't have life without potassium-40, for instance. Everything has potassium-40 in it, but it's not. You can't turn it into something bad. It's potassium-40. You can fill a stadium up with potassium-40, and you can raise a family there in the middle of it. And spend every generation there will be no genetic, no adverse side effects. Your body treats it as homeostasis. Your body regulates it like a furnace regulates the temperature in your house, or an automobile cruise control regulates the speed of a vehicle. Your body can only absorb so much at any given time. Assessment of relocation measures following nuclear power plant accident in Fukushima. Childhood and adolescent thyroid cancer in Fukushima after the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Characteristics, X-ray detectors. They have studied, I'm just trying to put that puppy to sleep for some people, that they have studied every facet of radiation from Fukushima, for instance. And long before Fukushima, there's just millions and millions of studies. There's 4.3 million studies a year produced, paid for by the taxpayers, of course, hid behind paywalls. And a lot of the studies, the majority of them are on anthropogenic man-made radiation or something to do with creating it. And they like to get other universities to do the same studies without access to previous studies, so they have another independent study to quantify, which will be skewered, right? Purposely. I have folders and folders of scientists and professors doing the most hideous crimes when they're just a fraction of the population. That's pretty interesting statistics. Rapid ultra-trace determination of Fukushima-derived radionuclides in foods. So why would they study every facet of the ecosystem if it didn't affect every facet of the ecosystem? Why would they downplay the effects of every facet of the ecosystem, which I can show you the studies, and I will here for a little bit. Don't think for a second that I photoshopped all these studies. These are, you go look every one of them up, you'll find every one of them. And so why did you study all of these and downplay the effects every single time? When the right? Because they like to tell you that it's like a banana or potato chips, like it's natural, right? It's not. It's man-made. That's why we have terrorist laws. That's why there's the controversies between Iran. Iran's not going to nuke Israel, but Israel friggin' well might nuke Iran, right? And that could lead to NATO, which is now going to squeeze themselves in there apparently because they don't have a right to be there. There's no reason. There's no. They don't have a legitimate reason to invite themselves into that. Benjamin Netanyahu and Americans might not mind. Americans typically were controlling NATO. They were the biggest donators. Don't look past all the names. When you look at these studies, you see the blue list up right here. Remember, that's academics that lied to you. All of these are different academics. They studied activity of the teeth of abandoned cattle. They didn't go there themselves. They sent their students in there to pick that up. They're not going to nuclear wasteland. Clay mineral theory simulation. They studied every facet of Fukushima you can imagine. There's nothing they didn't study in any country on top of that. They studied the entire planet because it contaminated the entire planet, and they need to downplay it on the drop of a hat, so they needed to study. And they got every study you can imagine. They covered every base. They have plausible deniability for any attribute of Fukushima. And it's just the most scumbaggery thing you could do. Like, how many studies, if it's harmless, would you produce all these studies? If it had no adverse side effects, would you produce all of these studies? If it didn't, if there's anything that's got out as tritium, why are you looking at all these studies? If the IAEA says that they just released the 18th batch or something of water, like, it never stopped coming out. Never stopped releasing it. I mean, it's just. Yeah, my foot's not doing very good. It's life. There's a reason for it, right? It was meant to happen. So I can sit here for the next 15 days and suck it up and make sure I got nothing else to do, only get these shows in. That's good enough for me. I win. That's a win for everybody. Okay, I lost track of what I was supposed to be doing, which is not typical. That's the biggest lie you ever heard, right? Here we go. So nothing got out of these reactors. If you think nothing got out of the reactors, give me a thumbs up. I noticed I got no thumbs up again. What's wrong with nobody? Are countries with nuclear power plants surrounded by farms poisoning millions of people? Are countries with millions of farms? They should be, I suppose. Hang on a second here. It's such a complicated story, right? Oh. It's not, though, if you watch a couple of these shows, it's no longer complicated. And, you know, my heart goes out to the people that are here regularly. I don't really expect anybody to stay around regularly because it's a doom and gloom story. No matter how you try to tell it, there's no good about this story, right? It's heartbreaking. Okay, just give me 1 second here. I gotta get all my ducks lined up here. I'm getting better at this stuff, but it's not the easiest thing. So I got another idea here tonight. Hopefully that works. If it don't, it doesn't. If it does, it did. Here we go. We're ready. That's probably why I got no viewers and no this, no that. It's all good though. I don't mind. Okay, so now remember, these buildings really did blow up. I know it sounds crazy. If you listen to the mainstream, you come here, you're like, I don't know what to believe anymore. And you should believe Dana. Okay, so nothing officially got out of these buildings. Now, this plutonium, neptunium, decays to plutonium after 2.5 days. It was just as well to call it a plutonium because it's 20 days and 21 days in, which meant because there's 10 decays, so 25 days everything is decayed. There's 2.5 day decay ratio to Neptunium-239 rather to plutonium-239. That's got a 24,000 year half-life before it decays to some other hideous isotope. So Neptunium-239 plume is based on 20 days and 21 days. This is TEPCO's numbers. Now TEPCO excluded these numbers, right, are not in that model. Okay. So this is a satellite picture of England's, and if you want to look at any farm, and I'm going to show you a few, right? So why is every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms? So that's kind of one of the questions we got for everybody tonight. Are countries with nuclear power plants surrounded by farms, poisoning millions of people every year, every day, by eating the radioactive food? Now, the pictures I'm going to show you is not going to quite do justice, because they're going to show you nuclear plant after nuclear plant. But if you zoom back with a satellite, this is what most nuclear sites, that's Sellafield, United Kingdom, most nuclear sites will look like this. So how many people are poisoned each year by the food from these sites because you can't contain the emissions? This is wicked what they done here. This is just evil. They took fuel from other countries and reprocessed it and poisoned those farms. They poisoned those farms. And they used those farms to poison countries they wanted to weaken. Just give you some insight. The U.S. Navy study on beagle dogs and beagle puppies, 144, where they all died of multiple tumors. The majority of them died of bone tumors from the radioactive stem cells. The biggest byproduct is not plutonium, by the way. It's curium isotopes. And don't worry about alpha. They're the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel. And curium isotopes, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. And plutonium, in the U.S. Navy studies at Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico, killed all the animals. And the human kidney is 50 times less efficient, not 50%, but 50 times less efficient than an animal kidney at removing plutonium, and all the animals died. And all nuclear power plants are hemorrhaging plutonium and curium because of fuel pools. There's no containment. So then the big question is, seems as they're so aware of radiation, they know so much about it, they've done so many studies, they know that a nuclear power plant is the very last spot on the planet for potatoes. And a nuclear power plant is the very last spot on the planet for fruit trees. And nuclear power plants are the very last spot on the planet for any kind of farm, for fruit plants. It's all the studies saying don't put fruit farms near a nuclear power plant. So why is every nuclear power plant on the planet surrounded by farms? See, this is the reason I get the big numbers all the time, right? So why would you do these thousands of studies on Fukushima if nothing got out? And why would you done it to play it down? Because you already got all the studies that says this is going to contaminate the food, right? We've had that they've been producing them for years and years, but not so much lately. Because you want a nuclear renaissance. So why is almost every nuclear power plant, except for a couple of them, surrounded by farms? When you know the farms are going to suck up the radiation, what's the benefit of that? Why would you do that? And then, like the Mississippi River or whatever, how many people are being poisoned downstream from the releases from the nuclear power plant? Now remember, they've been at this for 80 years. This is clearly on purpose because almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. Well, that can't be a coincidence, right? worldwide. And they know that radiation is absorbed into everything. And if it's food, now it's a weapon. It's a weapon now. And if you got control of that food, you can target countries or supermarkets in neighborhoods where you can do some serious damage to cities and communities long term by poisoning their food supply consistently, because nuclear plants last a very long time. So be careful of the strawberries you're eating. It's not a coincidence that almost every nuclear plant on the planet is surrounded by farms almost as far as you can see. Does anybody think that is a coincidence? So now we're at this point where we can't sustain life because the radioactive fallout now has destroyed the health of the soil. And because of that, you have flash floods now out of control post-Fukushima. And because of that, you're having forest fires that won't go out. And, the forests are so dry now when you get a lightning strike 4 or 5 years later, all that tinder didn't get broken down. It turned in, the ground is not soaking up water, so it's soaking up heat. Because it's not retaining the water no more, because we wiped out the bacteria and the fungus. Now we know this kind of stuff on top of that from, say, Chernobyl, Santa Susana, from Mayak, from anywhere major nuclear events have happened, that particular attribute, and it's interesting when you look at the health, you don't see abandoned farms around nuclear plants. So be careful of your tomato plants when you're getting them from, because these are cancer disguised as fruit, as bread, as milk, as eggs, as this is not a game. They have already the studies, and so the reason that they're producing all of these studies that you've been looking at is to downplay the event worldwide. No, because they're doing these studies worldwide. We have nuclear plants worldwide. The fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation 24 hours a day. Huge amounts are falling out locally. Absurd amounts are falling out locally. They are targeting, they're exterminating you. And so the idea of the poll tonight was to highlight, again, our countries with nuclear power plants surrounded by farms, poisoning millions of people a year, and from each farm. So there's 400 power plants, that's 400 million people a year being poisoned, significantly harmed, and they're going to end up with all kinds of autoimmune illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses. That's why I get the big views, right? Because, well, you can't beat me in a debate, so the only thing you can do is take the lowest route away, stick their tail between their legs, and just censor me and pretend that they're good when they look in the mirror. Just keeps telling themselves over and over and over. And every time they see a mirror, like, I'm a good person. They have to say that to the mirrors all the time. They're not normal, right? It's not normal. I was going to play a song. I didn't get it. How far are we into the rabbit hole right now? James put out a real cool song. I put a link in the description there today when I posted the video. Dead on, man. I'm going to play that at the end of the night, I guess, because we're not that far away from it now. So this headline here, irreversible heart damage for children is 50 atoms a kilogram. Irreversible heart damage for birds, animals, mammals, insects, only be a fraction of that. So 50 becquerels. A becquerel is a pulse of energy in every direction, an explosion. And your body doesn't have an autoimmune trigger, nor does birds or mammals or animals or any species. And so if it's in proximity, it's destroying chromosomes, cells, DNA. Your body has to try to repair that every single second because of these, that case up there, 50 explosions a second. You can put, now you need an atom, an isotope to make, so think of an atom. And so one of these little dots, think of that as an atom. And you can put 200 million of them on the head of a needle, you can't see it. But 50 of them will cause irreversible heart damage for your children. So you have no way to perceive that. And they're aware of that. They're blatantly aware of that. That's a big joke for them at their get-togethers and their board meetings, right? They have all kinds of sinister jokes. Like thinking for 1 second that this is a coincidence that almost every single nuclear plant is surrounded by farms. Okay, so Japan, food was banned by 14 prefectures for over a decade by 55 countries. But yet they produced all of these studies to say it's safe. Great Britain, for instance, plutonium from Sellafield were all the children's teeth. So they went to the dentist, and they got the dentist to collect up the teeth of children for them. And that's some kind of pagan ritual, satanic ritual, and then they actually gave it to the scientists who'd done experiments. But they said it was harmless. And then when leukemia epidemic showed up in the children, they said it was from the common cold because the nuclear plant was just 30 kilometers away. They didn't want to blame that. An academic, there's some good ones out there, but if you're playing in the nuclear industry, then you're a scumbag. Radiocesium interaction with clay minerals. So they have all kinds of studies, absurd amount of studies. Because they'll show you just one of these studies, and that's it. Have a nice life. You're looking, what I'm showing you tonight is absurd, and what I'll continue to show you for over the next 14 days, counting today. Making sense of complexity in risk government and post-disaster Fukushima fisheries. So they need to downplay every facet of Fukushima by doing studies. So how much money did that cost? How many billions and billions of dollars? They spent around $40 billion picking up 30 million one-ton bags. So don't think for a second they won't spend $30 billion cooking up all of these studies to downplay it, misrepresent it. Because this is exactly what they've done. Dispersion of Fukushima's radionuclides in a global atmosphere and the ocean. I got to play the shit down into that one, Dana. It'll reach the coastline in 4 to 5 years after the accident. Let me show you another study from the French government of a spike. That's 20 days over there, that model. 05, 04, that's 31 days or something. This is the small modular reactor, which is the size of a football field. People are lunatics, eh? And all of this only exists, this narrative, these crazies, the small modular reactor narrative, which doesn't exist, by the way, only exists, right, because the stoic media went out and pretended that they were 150 feet above the Fukushima stump. And therefore nuclear didn't get the black eye, fat lip, the tossing of the building that they deserved. They deserve to be deep sixed. And should use all the nuclear academics to build a bridge across Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz, with their bones. Fukushima followed Milano, Italy. Everything was meant to downplay it. Learn how to learn from failures, Fukushima. Plutonium, isotopic signatures. Signatures! Everything was contaminated. We have the documentation. But when all of these studies are meant to downplay, there's a couple of them probably not, but almost every single one of them are meant to downplay the Fukushima event, to misrepresent every facet of it. Like, how do you get away from 30 million one-ton bags? Now, some numbers are 60 million, But if that's 1 ton bag is 2,200 pounds, Japanese in metric. That's 5-6 rows of traffic around the planet of 1 ton trucks, bumper to bumper. Just trying to give you some context of the madness of this scale, which was 3% of the land. They picked up the topsoil, and not academics or institutions, but the homeless, the destitute. But we should have scraped up the surface of the entire planet. This is madness. This is 23 days after Fukushima. This is the French government. This is based on a spike of radioactive fallout. It's not based upon the inventory, say, from reactor 4 and reactor 3. This is mind-boggling. So, yes, but it doesn't matter if it's a small nuclear accident or a big nuclear accident. Everything now is the straw that broke our planet's back. We can't have any more. Our planet now is too fragile. All the species are showing up emaciated. Is that the Taiwan government, or that Japanese government? I can't remember now. For some reason, I think that was the Taiwanese government. These whales now are showing up. There was an interesting exhibit showed up in the news cycle there a few days ago at a major Catholic church anyway. And there was an Israeli artist who sculptured a humpback whale, much like this one here, that was emaciated. And there were times of global warming, stuff like this. But the sculpture, and wait till you see the pictures I got. I haven't got it here tonight, but the sculpture is of an emaciated humpback whale, a whale that had starved to death. But that's not acknowledged. But that is some of the sickest shit I ever saw. That was a couple of days ago. And some of you, I'm sure, have probably seen that. This is a blue whale. This is supposed to be 300. Like, if you stand up there, the whale's not even up to your knees. This is an animal that should weigh almost 400,000 pounds. This one's around 90 feet. Full size would be around 100 feet. This is absurdness and overdrive, right? So now, would they take out a few billion people or more on this planet because the planet now can't sustain any life? The soil can't last much longer for growing. The bees are almost gone. Now, if you go back and watch my last presentation, a couple of videos back on insects, and I got a lot of those studies talking about how the soil becomes brittle, like everything else that radiation comes in proximity to. So then when you took it in context of all the studies produced of every facet of the ecosystem, to downplay every facet because it contaminated every facet of the ecosystem. Everything was contaminated. How else can we explain all of these studies studying every facet of the ecosystem, see? And that's worldwide symmetrical. And we know what the attributes long-term of this. These are high-level numbers we're talking about. Like they're downplaying the numbers, but I can show you the numbers. And you go back into my playlist, you'll see an absurd amount of that. So why would you produce all these studies if nothing got out, if only tritium was being released from 1,000 tanks? Because that's the official story. The official story is there's the nuclear meltdowns, nothing escaped the site. When everything, you had 36 reactor cores. Chernobyl was a new reactor, it was a small reactor, it was a graphite reactor. Japan's pure uranium, pure plutonium is a completely different concoction, like elixir of hell, that produces over 1,000 isotopes. And each of the reactor cores were massive. There's 36 of these massive reactor cores were dispersed into the ecosystem. This is why you're producing all of these studies, but that's also why we're seeing supercell typhoons, supercell cyclones, supercell hurricanes, massive floods. We predicted these 10, 12 years ago, 14 years ago. And we never dreamt we would live to see today. I mean, things have progressed at just a gut-wrenching, just stop you in a track rate. When we done the research expeditions for 6 years, I was under siege the entire time. We've never wavered. And there's just a little tiny group of people helping, supporting and contributing the best they can. We have never wavered. We've gotten much better at articulating the issues and the whole food chain effects and everything, the biotas everything is affected. Every species, there's nothing escaped it. They studied everything, and that's what these studies are. And this is only a fraction of what I've actually got about this. You can't keep up with it. Everything's meant to downplay. Why would you produce all these studies, pay out all that money? Like they picked up 30 million one-ton bags. Now they're just recycling it. They're dumping it in farmers' fields and everywhere else because people stop paying attention. This is not evil. This is satanic. These are sadistic, satanic lunatics. These are lunatics. We need to stop these monsters. So they've studied every facet of the ecosystem, because it's just Fukushima. But we've been hemorrhaging radiation from 1,000 fuel pools. We still are all day, every day into the ecosystem. And almost every nuclear plant is surrounded by farms. The reason I got this fancy poll here tonight. Are countries with nuclear power plants surrounded by farms that are poisoning millions and millions and millions of people each year at stores, at restaurants, in your kids' lunches, in your kids' cafeterias? They're targeting your kids, folks. And they know the difference, right? They're not naive, they're not gullible. They're the most informed chicken-neck traitors, sadistic traitors we've ever come across in history. It's the biggest breach of academics in human history is the nuclear industry. And we've struggled nonstop, and people have sacrificed so much to keep this operation and the story alive on top of that. And it's heartbreaking to see any denigration of this operation. And I'm just one person. I wasn't healthy when I started, right? That was the farthest thing from healthy when I started all of this. And it's been just brutal, just an unbearable, brutal experience. And that's just the way it's going to be forever. I can't accept that. Why did they study every facet of the ecosystem if nothing got out? Why did they find it in every facet of the ecosystem if nothing got out? How could you contaminate every facet of the ecosystem, the land, the trees, the homes, the playgrounds, the schools, the shops, the restaurants, the schools, universities, the drinking water, the taps coming into your house, the washing machines? Why would we contaminate everything and there's absolutely, positively no adverse side effect? Like a fucking banana, Dana. Excuse me. You're a little passionate sometimes. Cancer rates, like thyroid tumors means radioactive hormones for the rest of the developing life, for goodness sakes. And that's true, applicable for every species. And we're at the top of that food chain, so imagine what's happening to the species. Aren't you wondering why you're not getting insects on your windshields anymore? Don't you even care? Well, you don't have to clean your windshield or your bumpers anymore. I am seeing some at high altitudes, but most of Canada was naked. How can you do studies on everything in the ecosystem, and there's not a single media out there will challenge the assertion that everything was contained in 1,000 tanks, and the only thing that's getting out is tritium, and it's only less than a gram that came out of reactor 2 routines. I mean, the lies are so big, it's so easy to disprove them for any academic and any student. And they've never been challenged by any medias or any university students, any professors, any of the big foundations. Nobody's ever challenged these narratives, not a single time. Because you got to study for everything. Scaremongering about Fukushima radiation is damaging. Fearmongering. It's one of my favorite studies. From Science Direct. These are serious. They produce absurd amount of studies, fake studies every year. They're like one of the worst things that ever happened to a planet. So, why is, and I think we quantified that, right? Why is almost every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms? Is that a legitimate question? Right? Why is almost every nuclear power plant and the drinking water for millions of people? Why do they always situate themselves in these? They can't contain the emissions. You're looking at vapors from the steam cooling. That tall, skinny stacks, they're hemorrhaging from the fuel pool. There's no containment. So you put the fuel, you can pick it up and drop it in the reactor. It's not going to, you got, decent gloves on, it's not going to hurt you. Once you start up that reactor chain reaction, you can never, your organs will melt if you get within proximity of fuel within a few seconds. So when you're looking at every nuclear power plant except for a few surrounded by farms, you need to ask yourself a couple of hard questions. They've been at this for how long? 60 years or more? Well, you gotta say 80 years because that's what everything shows us. We've got all the studies saying you shouldn't do that because it sucks up the food, sucks up the radiation. But yet here they are, every nuclear power plant, knowing that it's going to contaminate the food if you surround it with farms. They have the absurd amount of studies knowing the difference. That farm will guarantee unequivocally accumulate the radioactive fallout. It's not up for debate in the academic community, yet they allowed this to happen. That is a terrifying thought, see? So now we have a war, and we're going to close her here now soon. We have a war in Iran. I didn't think I could make it to the 2 hours, and I tell you the truth. We have a war in Iran, but it's not a war. Iran didn't declare war. They're just defending themselves. They're not going to Israel. They're using drones. Israel's restricted all pictures. So that means there's a lot of damage going on. And Israel doesn't care about 7 million people. 2 million of the ultra-Orthodox Jews, they're loving every second it is. That's part of their, it's part of their prophecy. That's all they care about. They spend their whole lives reading 2 books, the Torah and the Talmud. They don't give a shit about you or anybody else on the planet. And I really mean that. They really mean that. In the most possible way. Their prophecy calls for you to die, all of you to die, and for them to be the only people in Jerusalem, and only those in Jerusalem go to heaven. That's why they were ethnically cleansing Jerusalem. It's because they don't want to fight forever in their so-called heaven, right? And that ideology is manipulated. Benjamin Netanyahu has spent his whole life, his entire career, invoking all of this, that we're Amaleks and everything else. Well, I'm not a bad person. I don't give a shit about Israel. Israel, fuck off and die for all I care. But if you're going to destroy the whole planet, then don't be surprised if a few people tries to resist. And like the world right now, one of the prophecies in the Torah, the Talmud, I'm not sure, is that the world will turn against Israel, and God will strike down all the Israelis' detractors, and only those in Jerusalem will go to heaven. So everybody else dies by God's hand in a flash of fire, nuclear weapons. But I mean, they're being pummeled. They've never been pummeled before. They're being hit with bunker busters going down into their little safe base. They've never been attacked in their own city until he attacked Iran 9 months ago. Iran just wanted to be left alone. And Israel says, well, we're powerful enough, we'll destroy you like Gaza and anything else we touch us. And if you don't defend yourselves, we'll kill you anyway. So they just don't care. They're using a lot of fodder as soldiers from different countries. Benjamin Netanyahu you won't find him. He's not sitting in the office. He's not stoic. He's hid away in some bunker. They're taking down the cameras all over Israel off the streets that they're using as police lookouts and everything where they can control the population. That has now been weaponized against them. They're being targeted. And they wouldn't be total censorship unless that was true, right? The aircraft carriers didn't run away because they had no damage. They had to go away and try to repair the damage, do this. They got another time with 3 more aircraft carriers coming in to relieve them. They just got here. Why did they need to be relieved? Because they got serious damage. They don't want Iran to understand that. And I'm sure Iran knows it. Because Russia or China told them, right? They have access to that information. Can Israel or Iran create a plume like this? Yes. All nuclear power plants, the fuel pools are producing plumes like this every day for 60 years now. It's assimilated into everything out there. So eventually it will wipe out all the species anyway. Fukushima was a pulse event, and now all the whales are emaciated, all the insects are almost gone, the pollinators are almost all gone, the earth is tinder dry. We have supercell storms that are scorching the earth. Supercell typhoons, hurricanes, winds where there's no infrastructure with building codes for. It's only going to get worse. How long before cities are blown right out into the oceans, right? Not very much longer down the road, because winds we're seeing realistically at 300 kilometers an hour. We're seeing 250, 265 sustained winds miles per hour. So how long before we hit 300 miles per hour? We know we've seen gusts of that now. Well, we're seeing multiple every year of typhoons, cyclones, and hurricanes that we've never seen before. This is stuff we've never even dreamt of. This is stuff that, we did dream up that it was like that on Mars, but not on Earth ever. Otherwise, we would have building codes that would be much more appropriate, right? We don't have that. All right. Our countries with nuclear power plants surrounded by farms, poisoning millions of people a year at stores. So this is part 2 of the first part was about Israel and Iran. And giving you another narrative that most people won't get to see. Hopefully I've done some justice to it. I had a few problems with the volumes because I'm getting old. Everything is breaking. Believe me, everything is breaking. And my heart is broken because all the whales are gone. And pretending is not going to do the job anymore. We need to fight back. This is our last chance. This is Earth's last stand. We have an opportunity. This is our golden opportunity. In a year or two, AI will just drown us out. We'll still be going strong, but AI will control everything. It's doing it now, certainly. I noticed the AI centers are being attacked in the Middle East. That's not such a bad thing, trust me. That was probably the only good thing I've seen out of the whole friggin' last 9 days. I'm busted up. One day at a time. All right, so let me check and see if there's anything new. Okay. Now I put a link in the description. Over here. And we're going to close the poll down in about 2 minutes. Are countries with nuclear power plants surrounded by farms poisoning millions and millions of people each year at stores and supermarkets and restaurants and diners, etc., etc., in the cafeterias in your schools and universities. You better believe it. I'm not here to have a good time. I'm here to tell the truth. The truth. That you gotta pay attention. The world is not what you're thinking. Nuclear Energy Launchpad, and you find that at James Lucid on YouTube. Links are in the description. We're gonna play that song. That's got a wicked beat to it. That's fantastic. That's a win. And we'll see everybody on the next one tomorrow night. I'm going to try to post my shows a little bit earlier, just so people know. I'm going to be censored, but the truth will still be here. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see you on the next one.
Nuclear developers, something unprecedented. Everybody greenwashed into new initiatives. Fuel cycle staged out, private floor all clinical. Fast track startup, make the risk look trivial. Test floor, shield wall, all the boys try. So baptized, DOE nightlights, everybody so dead-eyed. Pilot run, first of a kind, sell it for a limited time. Critical by July, what price Anderson act like? Direct access to national nuclear expertise. Everybody to come, whole scene radioactive. Press shots, make the waste photogenic. Dress code, make disaster anthropogenic. Launchpad USA, wide scale commercial deployment. Whole crew run D, say less. Stay sleep. Nuclear launchpad, dead concepts, investors wrestler. Launchpad, fast track enrichment innovation. Mox, fuel in my car. Launchpad, come on baby, get strapped up. Out back, haul yard, operational, authorization chain, all optics intentional. Hot cell, sealed bay, whole mood, look commercial. Bury what you can't solve, then rename it essential. Fuel bay, boys, paper suits, dead optics, close, circuit monitor, whole process like narcotic. Launch that on my lips, make the rollout sound harmless. If the whole world peaks later, they don't even wanna face it. Red lane, low tone, everybody too ready, talking like a half-life. Only hurts if you let a new core, old waste stream, but Britain stay heavy. If it all goes first critical, they'll just call it legendary. Launchpad USA, commercial deployment. Whole crew run D, say less. Stay sleep. Nuclear launchpad, dead concepts, investors restless. Fast track enrichment innovation. Nox, fuel in my car. Come on, baby, get strapped up. No one say waste stream, no one say routine, Vincent. Everybody says cool, clear is clean. Nobody wanna notice.